All right, guys, I'm Nicolette, and today I am here with Dr. Brown. She is a sleep medicine expert, and she is here to talk to us about, yes, sleep. We are going to talk about sleep today, and specifically, we're going to talk about our kids' sleep and how this affects us as mothers and everything related. So thank you, Dr. Brown, for joining us. I do appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks for having me, Nicolette. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to sleep medicine?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a mom too. So been there, done that, got a couple of t-shirts, and then went to train to be a sleep expert. So essentially throughout my training in, medical school, sleep was not in our vocabulary. In fact, it was almost like a badge of honor to say you weren't sleeping. And it was a struggle. I felt like I needed to work like 3 times as hard to get my results because I was living in a fog. And then my kids came, and my son had reflux, and that was hard. Just kind of having a potential sleep disruptor that, even though I'm a physician, but for me, just I didn't realize how much that was impacting his sleep until I got it under control. But it impacted my sleep as well, and really that got me interested in understanding sleep better and adding that as part of my expertise, especially when I was seeing moms come in with their kids exhausted, and moms are like, I don't even know how I got here. I just know I am not sleeping. We need to fix this. And so that really connected with me and prompted me to establish my company, Restful Sleep MD, where I help busy moms prioritize sleep, figure out this sleep thing for their kids as well as for themselves as well. And so here I am.
Well, you mentioned reflux, and that's something my son had as well. We had him on Zantac for the first year of his life, and I always wonder if he would have slept better. But then I look at myself, and my parents said I didn't sleep either. So I mean, I gave them grief. So I guess the first thing I'd like to ask you is, do you believe that not sleeping is something that's genetic, or is it the product of some external factor, like in this case, reflux, let's say?
Yeah. So with genetics and sleep, there's a ton of research that is already being done. I think there's a multifactorial thing to it. So there are some genetic tendencies, and we really see that with like sleep, the amount of sleep people need. So we have the term like short sleepers and long sleepers. And so really so you may find some people who literally can, need very little amount of sleep, and then some that need a lot more sleep than others. And people have felt that there may be some genetic inclination to it. And so, but then there's so many layers to it. There's also some mindset issues around that as well. I hear people come and say he's just a bad sleeper. He's always been a bad sleeper. He can't sleep right within the hearing of the child himself. And so naturally they're like, yeah, I don't want to sleep. I can't sleep. My mind is, so you can see that there are layers to it. So even if there were some genetic tendencies, some of the habits, some of the things we talked about, like, reflux or medical issues or environmental factors or like, sociocultural setup and things like that all play a role. So it's hard to say, okay, this is purely a genetically based problem versus something else that's impacting their sleep.
Well, let's remove genetics then. What about outside factors? Are there, what do you find? I mean, even beginning at birth, initial outside factors that may impact everything from an infant up through childhood to adulthood.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so many things. One of the things, so we kind of can look at it from like within. So are there, depending on the age of the child, are there medical problems that are going on? Some children have, of course, things like, we talked about reflux or colic or things like that. So that can affect their sleep. The environment, sometimes, especially new moms, first-time moms, maybe, the children may be overheating because they've been bundled so snugly. So it may be something seemingly so simple, but it can potentially just change this child's sleep completely once they're able to address those issues. It could be things like the diet, right? Sometimes food allergies are a huge one, especially with children, medical conditions as well. So, I think for me, when I kind of look at it, when I look at sleep itself, I'm looking at it in like those sort of three categories. One category is medical sleep problems that can contribute to sleep. So we already talked about asthma, reflux, pain, they're teething, ear infection, they have eczema, all those things sort of in that in that category of sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, all those things are issues that can contribute to sleep problems. And then we look at what we say like behavioral sleep problems, right? So those
Okay.
are things like, the child needing to be, rocked to sleep, needs a bottle to sleep, doesn't want to sleep on their own, has, monster under the bed. So they sort of those things that are going on. And then the third category would be sort of those issues that are present during the day, but also have manifestations at night. So we'll see that more in children that have autism or ADHD or, people with anxiety or depression, where it's present all the time. It just has its own manifestations at nighttime. So those are sort of the three big categories. In that behavioral bucket, it would be, of course, including like the sleep hygiene things we usually will talk about, like caffeine and
Sugar.
sugar, exactly, or spending time on your device very, very close to bedtime and things like that.
I wasn't planning on talking about behavioral sleep problems, but you brought that up and it reminded me of a very prevalent issue that I've always had with my child. And so I don't think I was even considering this, but I think sometimes it's twofold. Sometimes I think that the behavioral sleep issues kind of become a consequence of the initial issue, right? So I think back to my son wasn't sleeping. I was exhausted. He's sleeping in the bed with me because I need to sleep. And so that becomes, it almost transforms into a behavioral thing because then he can't sleep without me, right? It's like a consequence of what was initially the issue. Now you've got two issues, right?
Yeah.
And that's an interesting issue. I mean, he's 7 and he's just getting to the place. So my husband and I have this argument about how he needs to fall asleep on his own. And I'm like, well, I'm going to lay with him until he falls asleep. And then, he'll wake up in the middle of the night and maybe I'd say 5 days a week, he'll wake up in the middle of the night and he'll say, Mom, can you lay with me to fall back to sleep? And so I'll come and I'll lay with him, but I'm falling back to sleep at that point. I mean, I'm not waiting for you to fall back to sleep. I'm sitting there and I'm out already. I'm probably still sleeping while I'm walking to the bed, right? So, you know, where is that? Like, where do we break that then? I know I'm going down a totally different path, but
I
I'm talking
know.
about behavioral sleep issues.
Absolutely. I see this all day, every day, and I help moms through this. So it may have started with anything. It may have started, sometimes it starts with an illness. Very commonly, it may have started with like, he had, I don't know, respiratory illness, and I wanted to watch his breathing. And so
Mhm.
I don't feel like I didn't feel comfortable without him sleeping next to me. And then
Right.
all of a sudden it becomes this kind of like habit,
Mhm.
and our children develop this sleep association. So many times we talk about sleep associations and sleep crutches and things like that really earlier on, but this is something that can go on until kids are much older too. It turns out sleep associations themselves are not bad. You have a sleep association, I have a sleep association. My sleep association is my pillow with my satin pillowcase. So when I want to go to bed, I have my pillow, I put my head on. But think about it. We all apparently wake up in the middle of the night, every one of us, because we cycle through different stages of sleep. So waking up, we all do, we just don't remember. And the
Mhm.
reason why we don't remember is because what we fell asleep with at the beginning of the night was still present when we
Mhm.
had those brief wake ups. So my pillow was there. It's nice and cool. If it gets warm, I may flip it over. So that may make me wake up a little bit. I may flip it
Right.
over. If God forbid it falls to the floor, Guess what? Fully, I need my pillow. So I get back up for me to resume sleep. So I had a normal, typical awakening, but for me to continue sleeping, I needed that connection again. And I grab my pillow, I put it back. That's exactly what happens with our kids. Because when they're falling asleep, the last thing they remembered was I was either being rocked, I was
Mhm.
being fed, or I had mom's warm body next to mine.
Mhm.
And so, they wake up like they typically would about 5 times a night. And if that connection is not there, he needs it to resume sleeping.
Right.
And so it's literally helping him switch that association, i.e., you, with
Mhm.
something else that he could pull up or pick up on his own over the course of the night. So usually what I would say is addressing that beginning of the night, because until that connection is made, then
Mhm.
the night weekends are just going to be there.
Interesting. You have me kind of thinking now back to when he was an infant and all the things I must have done wrong that really actually deprived me of sleep in the I mean, really, that's the reality, right? I mean, because the rocking, right? The
Yeah.
rocking was the thing that got him to sleep. And I
Mm.
mean, plenty of moms rock their babies, their
Yeah.
infants to sleep, but
Yeah.
it was that constant motion, the constant holding. And so
Mm.
that was what he always needed and
Mm.
the body. And so that's why we put him in the bed because I said, I
Mm.
can't do this all night. After
Yeah.
months of that, I
Yeah.
don't know how I got there. I don't know. That's the
Yeah.
reality. I don't know how I got to the doctor. I don't know how if you asked me about the first year of his life, I don't remember.
Like a
There is
blur.
no first year. I somehow survived and kept my
Exactly.
child alive and healthy. I don't know how.
That's what
So,
matters. Exactly. Yeah, it's a hard time. And moms, that's one thing I say, just do whatever you need to survive. But if it's impacting your sleep and you feel like you're not getting good quality sleep, and they are also having fragmented sleep because they need help so much,
mhm,
then that's something we could definitely walk through. But the priority is you got to you have to be alive to be able to take care of them. So
right, right,
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
right. So what would you suggest to a new mom, right? She's about to give birth. Now she wants to be able to sleep. She doesn't want to feel the way that I felt for that first year. What is maybe a suggestion you would give her?
Yes, so many, but keeping it simple. I think ahead of time, understanding and prioritizing her sleep even before the baby comes, having a routine right from the bat, even before the baby comes, I think is helpful. Having a plan that includes a decent sized community to help, because again, there's no type of sleep training you could do for a newborn. It's going to be challenging, not to scare you as a new mom out there listening. But of course, you've seen it, you've probably read about it. It's a challenging time. So build a buffer. Try to prioritize, get into a routine yourself as much as possible, even before the baby comes, leveraging as much help as possible so that when people say, oh yeah, sleep when the baby sleeps, this, that, and the other, and you have your entire house falling apart, something needs to be done. But if you have the help, you'll be able to have some flexibility. So whether what that help looks like, maybe a partner, maybe a family member, maybe a nanny, someone that can kind of help you take the pressure off,
Mhm,
so that you can take care of yourself. Because when you take care of yourself, you'll be better able to meet your baby's needs and take care of the baby. And honestly, those first 3 months, because babies don't start really producing melatonin regularly until that, like about 3, 4 months. So their cycle may be off. So that's more reason why, if their cycle is off, most likely your cycle will be off. So you really learning, skills or strategies and help to prioritize your sleep and things like that is very helpful.
do you think that there are again, I only know my own experience. Do you think that there is, maybe moms take that sleep deprivation, which has real effects, right? I mean, those are very, very real side effects to not sleeping. Um, for me personally, the constant, I'm being postpartum doesn't help, right?
Mm, mm.
The crying and the very anxiety ridden. And do you think that behavior, and you mentioned some of the things during the day, impacts even a baby. I mean, the vibe, is that real? Do they sense that?
They can. Even my kids. I remember even my kids. Even when they were younger, they're like, "Well, mommy, your your face. You're saying what was it? Maybe you're saying an okay thing, but your face doesn't look like you're okay." Like they can sense it. They
Mhm.
can sense it. They can sense our emotion. They can sense our energy,
Mhm.
and so yes, it does impact. And sleep deprivation absolutely makes postpartum depression even worse, and it
Mhm.
actually increases the chances
Mhm.
of that, because that all those negative thoughts, all those limiting beliefs about your ability to act as a new mom who literally brought a new child into the world, still you feel you're inadequate. Like, come
Mhm.
on. But in the midst of sleep deprivation, all the ability to reason just like is out the window. So
Right.
not that you cared for this child in your belly, you nurtured, you quit alcohol, you quit sushi, you did all that. And you brought this healthy, or even if you didn't, whatever, you brought this healthy child, and then all of a sudden you feel like you're not worth it. Like you have to, normal you would be able to step back and say, okay, please, come on. But then in the midst of sleep deprivation, you're like, yes, it's right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like all
Mhm.
those emotions. But a lot of times it's because you're exhausted, you are
Mhm.
sleep deprived, you're not getting out at all, you don't have a schedule, your days are blended into each
Mhm.
other, into weeks, into months. And so
Mhm.
all those things are just kind of off. And so sometimes even simple things like being able to, it seems simple, it may be hard, but it takes intentionality of prioritizing your sleep, setting boundaries around the things that mean self-care to you, changes a whole lot.
Mhm. And that's when I saw some changes
Mm,
myself, actually. I just to, really agree with you there. After about that first year,
mm,
I had sought therapy, for I was so anxiety ridden, I was so exhausted, I was so depressed. I didn't the days and everything was still blended. And
mm,
at that point I had gone back to work and there was some semblance of a routine, but
mm,
it wasn't enough. And so
mm,
when I started prioritizing, I started exercising, I started, making that time in the evening to leave the baby with
mm,
my husband, and kind of working through, okay, you have to trust the other person you created the kid with, right? I mean, you got to leave the house. I didn't want to leave. I was
mm,
so exhausted and I was so scared all the time
mm,
leaving, having my own things a little bit. Was I still tired? Did he sleep yet? No. But then by the time he became a year and we got him out of our bed, on his first birthday, my husband said to me, "Okay, that's it. He's out. He's got to go. He's got to go. Well, he's 1 year old. Goodbye." And so we transitioned, and
mm,
that's kind of where this started. And the existing problem, I laid with him. And so,
mm,
and then I worked with the therapist and she said, okay, now when he falls asleep, you get up now. And so you
mm,
do this every night until the only problem was I kept going back and I kept doing it. I kept doing it
mm,
until, till now. It
mm,
never stopped after that. I was
mm.
in the crib, Dr. Bra. I
Oh
was in the
my
crib. I have
gosh!
pictures.
You guys that look so cute.
I
Although,
have pictures. My husband would take pictures. I was in the crib with him
oh
because,
my God.
I was laying in the crib,
Mm.
sleeping. Thank goodness I'm short, right?
You were
Yeah.
also so exhausted that it didn't even matter where you were
No,
sleeping.
it
Yeah.
didn't. It didn't.
Yeah.
I used to, and you fall asleep in such scary places sometimes too.
Mm,
And you go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I fell asleep like that. You're sitting on the
mm,
couch and, and you're sleeping. But, if I was someone else who moved, goodness gracious, I wonder how these people do that.
mm,
Oh, scary. But I
mm.
was just exhausted and he was
Yeah.
sleeping. So I wasn't moving. There was no moving happening.
Wow.
I watched a lot of Law and Order that year, all night long.
Oh man.
Oh goodness. All right. So here's a question I have for you.
Mm,
I want to transition to naps
mhm,
because this was something, and I got a little crazy about this as my son got a little older. Now talking, let's go into the toddler years, and
mm,
my mother would love to let him fall asleep on the couch at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'd come to pick him up and he's still sleeping, and I said, what are we doing? He's never going to sleep at night. And she's like, well, he was exhausted. He was in the pool all day. He's tired. Let him sleep. And so I said, yeah, because you don't have to stay up with him all night. Right.
Yeah.
But I wonder sometimes if it even mattered, because
Mm,
some days I'd keep him up. I'd say, no, 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 don't let him sleep. And then he'd just be so tired, but not sleeping. And now he was crazy. So
mhm.
we just, what is the deal with naps?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yes. So there are two processes that regulate how we sleep. We call one, it's kind of like your process C, or your circadian rhythm, which is that internal clock that lets you kind of wake up in the morning and then helps you know that it's time to sleep at night. And it kind of works with the 24-hour clock,
Hmm.
such that in the evening, when your brain is prompted to produce the sleep hormone melatonin, that's released, and then you fall asleep, and then melatonin goes down in the morning, and so that's the circadian rhythm. The other process is what we call the sleep pressure, or your sleep drive. Okay, and think of it like either a balloon or a pressure pod or Instapot, whatever device you're using that accumulates pressure. So in the morning when you're awake, you don't have any sleep pressure because you paid it all off. You paid off all the sleep debt. And so you
Hmm.
start to increase that sleep pressure over the course of the day. And so that by nighttime, that pressure is high, right? Think the
Hmm.
pressure cooker and you just release it and the pressure is
Hmm.
really high, right? Um, so anything that drops that sleep pressure, your sleep pressure will have to build up again for you to be able to sleep. So naps drop the sleep pressure or the sleep drive. So if you take naps for a toddler, if they take naps in the early afternoon, that is fine because they still have enough time
To build
to
the pressure.
build. So think about it as it's almost like you're paying off debt, right? So they have enough time. But if you take a nap like later in the day, then you need more time. And so you're not going to be able to sleep
Hmm.
um, when it's time for bed. On the flip side, if you don't take naps at all, sometimes, especially in toddlers, they become what you call like overtired, where
Hmm.
they don't even know what to do with themselves. They're beyond exhausted. So, so naps are great. The timing is very important. And as they get older, they start to not need naps anymore and they can stay awake for
Hmm.
longer. Usually that happens around 4 to 5 years old.
Hmm.
So if your child is like falling asleep on car rides, you're trying to push naps and they're falling asleep on car rides, or they're fighting naps during the day, but you can see they're really exhausted.
Hmm.
Then at times, maybe giving them a short nap, like earlier in the day, keeping it short and sweet, just to kind of take the edge off
Hmm.
and still be able to get the benefit of having them be able to accumulate the amount of sleep pressure that they need at night is good. So I suspect both were happening with your son. He
Hmm.
was taking a nap late, and
Hmm.
then he was also overtired.
Yep. Well, are you supposed to wake them up then? So if you're talking about those early naps, are you
Mhm.
supposed to wake your child up after a short
I
period of
mean, usually, most of the time, most depending on their age, right? So if you have a child who's like 2 years old, they may be taking an hour nap, an hour and a half or so. Then as they get older, yeah, you want to probably limit it to about 1 hour or
time?
so. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, and then also depending on the time that nap is occurring, usually I'll tell people absolute latest for a child, no naps after say about 4 p.m. because
Mhm.
they need at least 4 to 5 hours or so to be able to have enough pressure to be able to sleep. So the end of the nap has to happen around then, regardless of what time they go to
Right,
sleep.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. I understand. All right. I just thought of something. So I just thought of something. My so I'm thinking about one of my neighbors. I'm thinking about my mother, and she used to be put to bed at like 7 o'clock when it was still
Mm,
light out in the summertime. My
mhm.
grandmother would get them into bed at 7.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, like, how does that work? Does it matter then? I mean, if the pressure is there, like, does it matter if it's still light out in the summer? And, like, there's parents who like really put the kids in at 7. That's wild to me because my son's in bed at like 11:30 and he's still going. He could keep going.
Yeah. So yes, it does. So remember we talked about that sleep pressure
Hmm.
and also the circadian rhythm. So they
Hmm.
kind of work together. So that sleep pressure is high enough sometime like right in the evening. Your circadian rhythm is also sort of getting to a point where things start to go down when it's time for sleep. So around then, your pressure is high, your
Mhm.
melatonin starts being produced, sleep happens. So there's a
Mhm.
sweet spot. That being said, there's a little time, about an hour or two just before bedtime, that we get like this surge of energy,
Yeah.
and people call it like the forbidden zone. And so for most kids, if you put them to bed be around that time, that forbidden zone area, sometimes for every child is a little bit different. Sometimes it may be around that like 7 p.m. to maybe 8 p.m. They have this burst of energy
Mhm.
and they're just like wild. It
Mhm.
might be because they're in that forbidden zone. So the key would be trying to put them to bed like either a bit later or
Mhm.
just right before. That's the thing. So now that circadian clock works with light, remember, because your
Right.
brain senses that things everywhere is dark, and then causes melatonin to be produced. So if it's bright out, it's really hard. Even if you have a high sleep pressure, unless that sleep pressure is like super duper high, it's hard to sustain enough sleep when it's so bright out. So
Mhm.
in that case, if you do have a child who does need to go to bed early, about 7, because some kids do, especially when they're younger, what we would recommend is, finding ways to make the room as dark as possible. So like the blackout
Right.
shades, and if people are still moving around in the house, getting like a noise machine,
Mhm.
things like that, having a routine so that it cues their body to know that it's time for sleep. Because even though light is one of the strongest cues for our circadian clock, there are other factors that play a role. Our dinner, so dinner time, the apart from the light, activities, all those kind of things helps our body know that, okay, it's time to go to sleep.
You bring up dinner, and you mentioned foods earlier. So,
Mm.
are there any foods that, or even food practices, right? Like timing. Are there any foods that will impact your child's sleep?
Well, I mean, you may hear people say, oh, yes, the glass of warm milk does it. Or what else is there? Like, sugar rush, all those kind of things. Well, it's the science is not that clear that they make like significant differences. There are definitely some foods you want to avoid around bedtime. I think for me, one of the things I would rather focus more on is the timing of your food. So you want to make sure you avoid eating very very late. So say about, at least avoid eating about 2 to 3 hours before bedtime, maybe about 2 hours or so at least before bedtime. The reason why is your body at night is focusing on sleeping and recovery from the day. Your brain is working on memory, your body is healing, your immune system is getting improved and things like that, not focusing on digesting food and things like that. And especially when you have kids who have reflux, that's a huge one. So if you
Mhm.
feed them too late, close to their bedtime,
Mhm.
and you lay them in bed, then they may actually have disrupted sleep because they have reflux because they're being fed so close to bedtime. So those are just some things I would say paying attention to. I mean, people talk about things like of course, then you want to avoid the other things you want to avoid are, caffeine or
Right. Right.
caffeinated beverages or things like that. Some foods people say contain a little bit of like tryptophan, so lean proteins
Let's
like
get them on the turkey, right?
turkey, some like fruits and nuts and kiwi and cherry, tart cherry, all those, you see all that. So for you to have enough from those meals that's going to help you fall asleep, you're going to
Mhm.
have to eat a lot of
Right.
it.
Right.
So
Right.
I don't know that that's going to be the magic. I think there are things that you can try to avoid to promote healthy sleep. And I think eating well, eating right, eating healthy, eating all food, colors of all of your food, making your food as colorful as possible,
Mhm.
all those things will promote good sleep regardless.
So my 7-year-old doesn't want to go to sleep without eating right before bed. Now, we've there is always a readily available supply of food in this house. We, you know, feed him dinner. And even whether he eats that dinner or not, let's say, last night he ate an entire meal. He ate very well at dinner time, traditional dinner times, maybe 5:30, 6 o'clock. By 9 o'clock, he is hungry. And now I don't mean, I need some fruit or, crackers. He's hungry. He wants another meal. And this has been going on for about 8 months now. And if he doesn't, he can't fall asleep. And now I know that feeling a little bit, because if my belly's grumbling, I need to put something in it to fall asleep. I can't sleep. But I mean, is there a connection there between them being hungry and not sleeping? And should you even be that hungry before bed? What's up with that?
So if he's depending on the dinner time, dinner at 6 p.m. is assuming that you'll be going to bed, or 5 p.m. is assuming you'll be going to bed like within 3 hours or so. So of course, yeah. So if he's not going to bed, and if he's still awake at 9, then the likelihood that he might be hungry or bored could be a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then kids also get into habits very,
Yes.
very easily, because they're now like, okay, well, I eat and then I go to bed, and
Right.
you know what I mean? So sometimes it may be like literally readjusting his schedule such that you set a bedtime, and then from there kind of calculate, like, we have to move
Work
things
backwards.
back. And encouraging more of a snack, especially because the thing about it is, if he eats a full meal around 9, then the likelihood that he'll be sleepy and he would have digested the food in time to go to sleep at a reasonable time is going to be harder. So
Right.
you end up you end up pushing things off and off and off again, because of that, that circadian clock.
And maybe it's even
Not
something
unusual.
like offering those snacks
Mhm.
maybe at 8 o'clock instead, right? You want, and he's big on and he eats healthy, which is crazy because he asks for healthy foods. He's not really, occasionally if I tell him there's nothing, the kitchen's closed, mommy's not making anything, he learned how to use the air fryer because I told him I'm not cooking I don't even like to cook regularly. So if I'm going to cook a second time, it's not happening.
Yeah.
I'm not making anything. So he learned how to make like the chicken nuggets in the air fryer and like things in the air fryer quickly so that he could have a snack for himself.
Mhm.
But he wants his fruit. That's what he wants. He wants strawberries, grapes,
Absolutely.
apples. He can eat
Yeah.
that all night. Some, a couple graham crackers, and he can do that. But then there's nights, he wants his mac and cheese at 9 o'clock. No,
Yeah.
mac and cheese at 9 o'clock. Crazy.
Yeah, I know. So I love what you said. So having dinner can still be at that time, but setting a time where where he has a
Mhm.
snack and making that part of his bedtime routine. I think that's the best way to
Right.
go. So, bedtime routine, 2 to 3 calming, relaxing activities that head in the direction of the bedroom. And so it usually, I love it starting with nutrition. Nutrition is a great start, even for babies. Like, you give them their last bottle and change their diaper, or read a book to them, cuddle, and then put them down to
Mhm.
sleep. So I think setting up that routine where it's like, okay, our routine starts with a snack. So what time are we going to go to bed? We'll start with that routine.
Mhm.
And then slowly, especially if you notice like he's not going to bed until much later, slowly moving that bedtime routine earlier and earlier so
Mhm.
that he can go to bed earlier.
Right.
Over a period of a few weeks, depending on how long he's been going to bed late, is always a great start. And that snack should be, of course, a nutritious snack. Like you said, fruits are perfect. A handful of crackers, peanut butter on crackers,
Mhm.
string cheese, all
Right.
those things are really healthy and nutritious snacks that, shouldn't affect his sleep.
That's great. Good to know,
Yeah.
actually, because that's what he goes for most of the time,
Yeah.
but a lot of it, he's a
Mhm.
growing boy, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, he decided he'd like to eat. Uh, so there's one last thing I want to talk to you about. I think we've kind of progressed through from infant to now, kind of
Mhm.
a real, child. And you talk a little bit about sleep and learning in your blog,
Mhm.
and I would love to just get your take on what's going on here, maybe even in society now. Are we seeing a lot less sleep happening? Are we seeing that affecting learning abilities? What are we seeing there, and how can we take action?
Yeah, yes, we are. So, very, very clear evidence that our sleep is connected with our cognitive performance. And so you think about children, they spend a lot of hours of their lives sleeping initially. Even babies sleeping like 17 hours. It just shows you how important sleep is to their growth, right? That's a period of very rapid growth, brain growth, body development, and things like that. So the same thing with our learning, there's a very tight correlation. And they've done research to see that those who are sleep deprived compared to those who get enough sleep,
Mhm.
there's a significant difference in their ability to process new information, generate new ideas, and recall things. So that's something that's really important. And especially for our children who are going through a period of very rapid growth, the more reason why we try to make sure that we prioritize sleep for them.
Mhm.
Now, there's hormones in our body that gets produced when we sleep. One of those hormones is growth hormone. And, growth hormone, it says it itself, especially for children who are just growing. And so really ensuring that they get enough sleep is important to promote growth in them, to promote their learning. The other thing about it is we've seen that some children that are diagnosed with like ADHD or ADHD-like symptoms where they have inattention, impulsivity, all those things is actually related to your sleep too. So sleep can mask and act like ADHD, and it can impact your behavior and your learning in school. And so lots and lots of studies have really shown and supported that, which is why we try to get our kids as much sleep as possible.
So, what would you say is the time to consider looking for help in any of these sleep areas? I mean, as mothers, we're worrying all the time, right? But
Mm.
what is a real, I'm sure there are different levels of help that someone might need, but what are some signs that maybe it's time to talk to an expert?
Yeah, absolutely. So getting an expert, I think you really want to start to consider if you've tried to establish, you know, general healthy sleep habits, and your child is still having a hard time getting the amount of sleep they need. They're either not sleeping enough, or they wake up and they're still exhausted, or they're excessively sleepy during the day despite getting enough sleep. Then that might be a clue that something else may be going on. And this varies. It could be insomnia, which is a condition where you have difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, or waking up very early. And it's been going on for about 3 months or so. It could be that. And then you have to look for things like other signs or symptoms like sleep apnea, which can occur in children as well, where they have snoring and difficulty breathing during sleep. And usually snoring is the usual most common thing that you notice, in addition to them just really being very tired during the day. If you have a child who has very, very restless sleep, either difficulty falling asleep where they're in their bed, then you're not even there with them and they're just laying there very uncomfortable, or they're asking you, can you rub my legs? Or you're seeing them really tossing and turning. That may be a sign they have restless leg syndrome. So that's another one. So different weird movements,
Mhm.
snoring, or just overall difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep after you've really implemented some healthy sleep habits. I think those are some red flags that something might be going on.
Well, speaking of experts, Dr. Brown, can you let everybody know where they can learn more about you and the work that you're doing?
Yes, absolutely. So again, what I do is really help busy moms. I wish I met you when you during that one
Me
year.
too.
I help busy moms just walk through everything around their sleep, their child's sleep. And I do this through some one-on-one coaching. I really just guide them because it's hard. And sometimes we don't even know what we don't know. We just know we're tired.
Mhm.
So that's something I definitely do. And the best way to connect with me is from my website at restfulsleepmd.com, or also on Instagram, where I'm quite active, also at restfulsleepmd. And then also I'm on Facebook and the other social media. I also have a YouTube channel, just really with very practical nuggets on how people can get better sleep for them as parents as well as for their kids.
And we'll put all of those links in the description here so everybody can reach out to Dr. Brown and see what she's up to. Thank you so much for joining I learned so much. I really did.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me, Nicolette.